Good day, everyone. As we go back to the start for the second time I'm recording this one. Fun and games. Alright, today we're looking at backing up Cisco configs and Juniper configs via, well, let's just concentrate on the Cisco configs, via iosconfig module, specifically the backup attribute. As you can tell, I've had some fun this morning. So, again, the files are all up in Git. Please head over there, look at the respective files in the folder. It's up to you to move them around or put them in your various paths. So, before we go too much further into it, why backup configs with Ansible? There was a great man, Prince Hakim of Zamunda, that once said, "One cannot fly into flying," meaning you really have to do your apprenticeship or journeyman on Ansible and playing with Ansible, cutting your teeth and really learning how to play with things. The more you break, the whole reason I have to re-record this one, the more you learn. And my one was a stupid problem. I left an S off a character. So if we think about why do backups with Ansible? Well, one, we've got a rather large blast radius now. We've got an inventory. If you're doing this at work or at home and your lab is starting to grow and grow, your blast radius is getting larger, so it's time to start taking backups. Ansible for backups, it's quite common that a client will say, we want a backup before you do any work, or we want a backup as part of a receipt of works, which you can do a diff against. Extremely common. But the cry could be, but why Ansible? There's so many better platforms. That there is. There's better tools, from writing Python yourself and Oxidized and Rancid and how they integrate with things such as tools off the shelf, SolarWinds. There's a million different things you could use. But this is an Ansible 100/101 course, so why not learn to dabble and use Ansible for this particular use case of taking backups of configuration files using the iosconfig module. And we'll actually show an example of how to do this for Juniper, how to do this for extreme switching, and XOS. We'll actually cover Juniper in this one here, and to my friends in Perth and friends in North Sydney, I've actually got your back. I've made a quick demonstration of how to do this for extreme NOS and for Ironware, which is the old, I think it's Brocade. It ended up being Brocade. Well, there you go. It's there. It's covered. But before we touch on this, I do want to talk quickly about a magic variable, a reserved variable. And we're going to use this variable today. It's called group names. We're actually going to do a quick check for a conditional statement. We want to see if the host is part of a particular group name, thus the magic variable. Some common ones we've already touched on so far: inventory host name, host vars, and now group names. There's a little bit about it straight from the Ansible module site. Please go and check that out, and especially any other special variables. Special. S3. So I want to talk quickly about iosconfig. iosconfig is primarily used to make changes to Cisco routers using Cisco AOS. For example, if we want to jump to config T to make a change on an interface description, so on and so forth, iosconfig is a module you will use. There are more specific ones, however, you can use iosconfig. iosconfig is huge. There are so many attributes to talk about, such as over here we've got a concept of parent iosconfig lines. Today we're going to look at one in this blog episode. We're going to look at one called backup and backup options, and I've quickly taken a quick look. Again, iosconfig, Ansible modules, wherever you are in your browser, go check it out in ios_config on the Ansible modules network modules site for a fuller listing. Whilst there, go take a look at junos_config2 because we're about to expose it just as it's fun. It's a long day. Again, you'll see I'm really harping on about our inventory file because we're going to look at the magic variable group names. And as I said, the reason I'm re-recording this is because I spent 10 minutes looking at a problem. It was because I left off an S on group names. I looked at everything except what was bleedingly obvious in front of me. So today's one, and thanks to Ben for showing me this great approach to doing a backup. Like I said, there's 20 different ways to do everything in Ansible. So today's one, we're going to write a multitask play, now using iosconfig. Yep, it's new. We're going to use backup sub-arguments of iosconfig module. And we're going to pull configs and put them in a specific directory named outputs, funnily enough. We're going to add a conditional statement which will only exist when a string, just here. Don't you love to proofread? When a string exists in the magic variable group name, such as we want the backup to run against Cisco hosts only when CPEs is in the group name. We want it to run against SRXs only when SRXs is in the group name. So on and so forth. I think it's about time to write one, don't you? Let's get on over there and write one. Now, I will have to clear my screen because I've already got it written. As I said, I spent at least 10-15 minutes looking at a problem that shouldn't have been a problem. So here we are. Let's declare it's a YAML file, and I'm going to commentate about what we're doing as we do it. Give it a name. Season 5, Episode 2. Ansible for backups. And we want this as a conditional playbook. I am typing quick, so apologies if you're going to get some typos in. There was a typo. Great catch. Gather facts. No. We do not want Python to execute locally and give us back information we're not interested in. Hosts. This is an interesting one. We're going to run this against all hosts. That is kind of like a wild card. And I'll show you in a second why, because we're going to negate the all. And connection is indeed network CLI, which you can omit. Tasks. Nothing should be catching you out at this point as different. Name. Our first task in this playbook. We want this to be task numero uno. Task 1 is backup Cisco device via iOS config module backup option. Just so we can see the task run in our screen. Now, here we get a little bit fun. We want the conditional right here. When, and this is where I also stuffed up earlier, that took way too long to fix. When string CPEs end string in group names. Think of that for a second. When CPEs is in group names, if we have a think about our group, the CPEs group will have two hosts. What's CPE01? What's CPE02? Feel free to press pause and go check out the inventory inv file for validation. However, we can see here, voila. Here's something I did earlier for you. CPEs, SRXs, etc., etc. Excellent. So we've declared this when to run, as my mouse and keyboard go missing. When. Now, we want to leverage iosconfig module. iosconfig module has a sub-argument of backup. Yes, we want a backup to run. Backup options, as we can declare some. Backup options has sub-arguments, such as directory path. And directory path, we could have file name, but we're going to go with some default options, and we will see those rather than explain them. And we're going to specify outputs in the current directory structure as the home of our backups. Remember, relative path. I am relative to outputs at the moment because I'm in my home directory Ansible outputs. Talking a lot. Let's just put a bit of a comment marker. So now we have a second part, because we're not happy just backing up Cisco. We want to back up some Juniper kit too, because we can. We're excellent automation engineers. Task 2 is backup Juniper, we've only got one though, device via Junos. If I could spell, _config module backup option. And just so we can see the task run. Again, we want a conditional. We want this to only run when string srx's end string is in group names excellent end. This will only run when that would have caused an error. srx's in group names. Excellent. Now we're going to call the Junos config module. Junos config, again, very much like iosconfig, has backup. Yes, we would like to run a backup. It also has options of backup options, funnily enough. And again, because we would like it all in the same path, outputs / once again, that is our relative to. And for my good friends who I've mentioned, actually I'll cover that in a second. It's comments place for you below. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's check our indentation while we're here. Looks pretty good. What the hell is on my Spotify? I have no idea. It's pretty worrying though. Right, we've saved this as play _ season 5 episode 2, and once again, home directory Ansible. Let's go over to our friend, this command line, console, and I think we're ready to rock. Ansible playbook -I calling a path to the inventory for our specific project, then a path to the play where this play is. Now, here we go. A few things should happen. It will go out. It will then start creating new files under outputs. And we'll see this on the screen. We should get then a receipt of our work saying some host was skipped because we want this to execute at certain times. And you will see what I mean by that. Excellent. It's skipping the first one, backing up Cisco OS. Obviously, SRX's SWT and the Raspberry Pi are not part of that. However, it's made a file for what's CPU01, what's CPU02. Excellent. Great stuff. Task 2, looking at the Juniper device. It skipped a lot, which is expected. We've only got one SRX. What SRX01? Changed. What do you know? What SRX01? So now we get a total receipt of our works. And the Raspberry Pi was obviously skipped. There was no play for it. And the Cisco switch, SWT01, that was skipped also. The rest were captured in one of the two tasks. That's really excellent. Now, to further clarify that, let's go over to our good friend Sublime. Now, as I've run this a few times, let's just take a look at what's the time right now. Date. It's 12:51. So if we go back to Sublime, we should see some files with a timestamp. Outputs. What did I say it was? 1250. Okay, 1250. Now I have to be careful what I show you because you're going to see some passwords. What's SRX01, for example? This is config file under the directory Ansible outputs. And as you can see, the SRX doesn't have a lot of config on it. However, it is there. Let's quickly look at CPO2. Again, it is there. So that's really excellent. I hope you guys were able to follow on with that. So if we were thinking a bit more about it, we see the piece de la resistance was the conditional when statement. And again, thanks to Ben for showing me this one. We wanted the iOS config to be invoked when the condition was true, when devices, or when in group name CPEs, what's CPO1, what's CPO2. And again for the SRX, which only has a single host, what's SRX. The Raspberry Pi didn't match, it was skipped. Switches didn't match, they were skipped. Now for my friends that are working on some extreme switching, I've got here for you, Russ Roy Aaron. Thanks for watching, by the way, guys. Appreciate it. Send me more money. There's an example play for you right there in blue. For my mates in WA, miss you guys, by the way. For the IMware stuff on the borders, there is an example of, this is actually what I have in prod for you. This is where I kind of leverage this one from. That's there for you as well. As I said, when we run the config module, we get a receipt of works, and we can see that Pio1 and Pio2, they didn't match a conditional statement, so they were skipped. And when we do look at the ones that were part of the conditional statement, a file was created, and we were leveraging some of the default file name creation from Ansible. I'm kind of fine with that. It gives me the device name, so the Ansible inventory host rather than host name. So we know this is what CPO1, what CPO2, for example, and we get a nice timestamp of when this was run. This was last night over a beer. So I think that's quite valuable. If you don't have a repository to bump this to that does version control, something like an Oxidized or a Rancid or whatever you like to use, just having it on a flat folder with a timestamp could save you bacon. Bit of version control. You could obviously run this with a cron job and you can run it every 5 minutes, or you could tie it into something like Jenkins, which does it properly. Cron jobs are a bit meh. So don't dogs make you happy? This is Harlequin, a dog we follow just to stay happy. He's a Great Dane. He's a special needs worker dog. He's great. So what did we cover? We quickly covered magic variables. We covered the when clause again. You're starting to see the power of when. And we quickly covered iOS config family of module, specifically on the backup option. That is very much real world. Next we're going to cover in Season 2 episode, well, it will be part 2 series again. We're going to cover the iOS loop command / with items. It is something you will use daily in your automation journey. I want to thank everyone for having the patience and working with me, and as usual, have a great day.